mean by that is that there are both governance, risk, and compliance aspects, and equally technology aspects that need to be considered when looking at said technologies. But I'll touch on it, and hopefully you'll find this educational and entertaining. Go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to change over. Okay, so what are we going to touch on today? We're going to start off with an introduction. I think it's also important just to explain to you what it is that I do from a product management perspective. I think there's a lot of different functions and roles within cybersecurity. And for me personally, I find product management and product managers to be a very integral part of it all. You ultimately are the CEO of your own business. You ultimately are tasked with doing a lot of due diligence, which essentially means research, developing, looking at trends, understanding what is it that your particular market needs and finding ways to best serve that market. I also think it's important just to recap what we touched on last year, having been afforded the opportunity to return. I think it's also for some people that are also returning, just to recap and leverage some of the previous learnings and build on that. And then as suggested and as the heading alludes to, we're going to talk around smart devices and cybersecurity, and then some of the best practices for securing those smart devices. And then we're going to surmise everything that we discussed. Okay. So just a bit about background, who I am, where I come from. This is me, have been in product for, I think, over 10 years now. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And equally, you can see from the visuals and some of the opportunities I've been afforded. As I've mentioned, we're returning from last year's successful cybersecurity school. Equally, I've been fortunate enough to share a stage with some of the best minds at the IT Security Summit. I've been fortunate enough also to done a lot of lecturing within tertiary institutions. So on the bottom right, that's me at UCT, just giving some insight and some personal hands-on experience of what we've encountered in the market. And then just in the middle there, that's the little version of me. And I think it's important. They often say that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So just a little visual there to show that my little son and me tend to be quite animated in the way that we approach and the way we present and talk about life. So yeah, hopefully he will follow in my footsteps, and hopefully you'll see him on the stage one day. Okay, so what is product management? I often get asked this question, say, what is product management? What does it entail? What should we be thinking about? How do you become a successful product manager? And I think what's important is that it always starts with a product strategy. You need to understand what are your visions, your goals, and map out a roadmap. Essentially, how are you going to achieve those visions? How are you going to reach those goals? And what are the metrics that you're going to put in place to track and manage and ensure that you align to what it is that you're trying to achieve? And that touches on the second point, that you need to align your product with the company's overall strategy and market trends, right? So in my current role as a technical product manager within Reflex, my goal is to build out solutions and products, solutions, processes, people, find the right people, leverage the right technology in order to build out valuable products for our clients and solve their problems, right? How do I do that? You need to understand your customer, right? So customer insights help. Understand your customer through research and feedback, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to pick an individual customer. It's just about understanding what is the market that you're trying to serve. For example, at Reflex, we focus very much on the mid-market. So essentially, we understand that our client is not necessarily an enterprise. It's more that market that's just between bigger than the SME, between the enterprise and the mid-tier, and that's where we tend to address and aim to solve our customers' problems. And when we talk around pain points, what are the things that are keeping our clients up at night? Because often in cybersecurity, we talk around security nightmares and what's keeping you up at night. And you need to, as a successful product manager, understand what your clients' pain points are. That could be industry specific. That could be, a particular market segment. That could be, a particular industry. Like I said, for example, be it legal, be it finance, be it entertainment. You need to understand what are the considerations and build your solutions accordingly. And that in turn means that you need to understand what the opportunities are and how do you drive innovation within that particular segment or within those pinpoints. Cross-functional collaboration. I often say that a successful product manager is a politician. You need to be able to work with multiple teams, multiple go-to markets, sales, marketing, support, fulfillment. Because essentially, if you want your product to succeed, you need to understand that there are multiple touch points. I can develop the best product in the world, but if it doesn't have the right support, if it isn't positioned right to the clients in terms of the problem that it solves, if it doesn't have the necessary product development or roadmap or strategy around it, I may find that in, let's say, for example, year 2, year 3, when I come after a 12-month contract, what does that mean for my clients? I haven't solved their problem in its entirety or over a delayed period. So it's about understanding all the different intricacies and the components that make up a successful product delivery or installation. So you're going to work closely with teams like engineering, design, marketing, and sales to deliver your product. You are the central point for all stakeholders. Hence why I said to you that you are the CEO of your own company. The buck stops with you. And that may be intimidating or daunting, but it's not designed to be that way. Essentially, what it means is that you just need to understand holistically how your product comes together. From a product development perspective, you need to consider the features and requirements to build a minimal viable product and the subsequent updates. Nothing exists in isolation, and nothing exists in that it doesn't need to be changed or evolved or retired at some point. There have been instances where I've had products that had a certain lifespan of 6 to 12 months, and after a certain period retired them. And what drives a lot of that is that because from a cybersecurity perspective and the threat landscape, it's constantly changing. So I need to ensure that from a product development perspective, with all the new threats, with all the new challenges that come with securing our clients' environments, I evolve accordingly, right? Ensure the product is delivered on time, within scope, and in budget. That is key. And what I often do is build myself in a little bit of fat, if I can use that term, essentially meaning that I will give myself a week or two or a little bit of leverage just to know that if I do miss a particular timeline, I can make it up at a later stage. From a performance management perspective, track key performance indicators to evaluate your product success, and don't be afraid to do an internal review of your particular product. Don't be so stuck in saying, I've done all my research, I'm happy, I don't think I need to review it. I think it's important also to have product health discussions with your clients to be like, are we meeting your needs? Does it meet your requirements as you put forward? And that ultimately means that you can always evolve and add additional services and functionality, and in turn, create a very secure and dependable product to give our clients that level of assurance. Assurance being that the product is supported, it's patched, it's managed, and it's constantly evolving in line with the threat landscape. And then performance measurement, track performance indicators, KPIs, which essentially is key performance indicators to evaluate your success, and also just to ensure that you are moving accordingly and you are building your product in line to what your initial intention was. Use metrics like user adoption, customer satisfaction, and revenue impact. We tend to measure our products a lot on the revenue, on growth, but I think of equal importance is, are the customers satisfied with what you put forward? I mentioned earlier around product health. Does it meet what you originally had intended it to do? And are users adopting the service? Are you seeing that growth? And I think this is important just to understand what it means to be a successful product manager. Okay, let's look at 2024 lectures recap. So essentially, last year I spoke around cloud security and cloud platforms. I think still very much so relevant to today's discussion, and I'd like to build on that to ensure that the pieces that I put forward last year are expanded upon. And I think anything within IT is like Lego blocks. You need to be able to connect the pieces, and when you start building those different pieces together, the full picture comes into your mind. So let's look at what we touched on last year, right? So what's driving cloud adoption in the African continent, or let's talk globally for that extent. So we have this concept called CapEx, right, which essentially is this capital outlay that our clients are currently paying in order to procure servers, hardware, storage, networking components, switches, and anything that's required in order to provide a service to clients or to their clients, right? And essentially that means that you can either do it yourself or you can leverage someone that's made the investment. So if you look at cloud players such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Alibaba, Huawei, and the list goes on. Essentially what they've done is they've made the investment in the infrastructure and they want to provide you with a service. So that gives you the cost efficiency. So essentially what that means is that you pay for what you use and it allows your business to scale and scale in line with your costs. So I'll give you an example. If you want to launch the best app in the world, that means that you're still going to have to order all the IT components in order to deliver that. And before you even deliver that service, you're going to have to sit in a test and dev environment. And that's going to create a lot of delays, meaning that you're not going to be able to get to market as quick as you wanted to. And in turn, you may miss your market opportunity. But we're focusing from a cost perspective in that particular line item. Scalability and flexibility, it allows you to pay for what you use. So this concept of scale up and scale down, if you have a high peak period, for example, Black Friday, Christmas season, any particular holiday where people may be spending a lot of money or interacting with your service at a more than usual situation. So let's take, for example, the Easter weekend. We know people are going to be celebrating, and that means that people are going to be in shops a lot. So a lot of the retailers would leverage from cloud technologies because they don't need that entire infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean all the IT components in order to deliver that service to clients. So during peak seasons, they can leverage cloud technologies, host their application, host their systems to align to that particular peak or that what we refer to as a burst. And then from there, when that period goes down, they can switch off and not utilize that full capacity because it's not their day-to-day or it's not their normal season. We call it a seasonal requirement. And because of that, they can rent infrastructure for that particular purpose. So it's dynamic workloads, seasonal spikes without over provisioning. Business agility, and I touched on it earlier. Essentially, what it does is a lot of clients and a lot of people in different industries, or companies rather, want to be the first to market. How do you do that? You can't, wait for budget considerations. You can't wait for IT ordering, like everything to get signed off. So this gives you the ability now to accelerate quite quickly to market and in turn develop new products and services, right? But essentially, I would argue that you don't always have to be the first. And a good example of that was Pick and Pay ASAP. During COVID, they launched their on-demand delivery service, and they were the first. And essentially, Checker 60 came after that, and in my opinion, overtook them quite quickly. But that talks to just functionality more than actual solution. I think that Pick and Pay was a little bit not as unique and maybe a bit risk averse in my opinion. The reason why I say that is that the differentiator from a Checker 60 perspective, they guarantee delivery in 60 minutes. And now we're seeing other players like Zulzi and the like who are guaranteeing it in 15, 20 minutes. And leveraging cloud platforms to allow them to be the first to market and come quite quickly, right? So that talks to the rapid development of applications and updates, right? Now, if you look at it from a business continuity or security perspective, it gives you the ability to have a disaster recovery and business continuity, right? So you're going to get the data backups and recovery in case of hardware failures or cyber attacks. Now, because you're renting the service, right, from a cloud provider, they essentially are, provided that you've selected the data backup and you've put in certain mechanisms or selected the right options or done your configuration correctly, which basically means when you're provisioning the service on these cloud platforms, you've ensured that you've catered for disaster recovery and business continuity, and you've put in aspects related to cybersecurity attacks. That then means you, in some instances, may not have to have as big as normally required cybersecurity team. So that gives you the ability to leverage their investment and ensure that you have a disaster recovery and a business continuity strategy in place, right? It equally minimizes downtime with geographically distributed data centers. Now, remember, if we look at South Africa, our problem is quite unique, maybe not unique, but as it stands, we have load shedding. And because we have load shedding, there may be instances it shouldn't happen because a lot of the data centers guarantee a 99.999999% availability. So the reason why it's not 100% is nothing's bulletproof. But essentially, should something catastrophic happen in South Africa and our environment goes down, you can spin up an environment in another geography or another continent. And that ensures that there's business continuity and it's business as usual with minimum downtime impact to your clients. If we look at innovation and digital transformation, now there's a lot of words like fourth IR, digital transformation. Essentially, all they mean is the evolution of technology and how we, as consumers of technology, leverage the evolution of technology in order to build our innovative solutions, right? That's digital transformation. And if you think about advanced technologies like AI and machine learning, leveraging cloud platforms and IoT, sorry, leveraging cloud platforms gives the ability to utilize what the service provider provides you with in terms of compute capability. And in my next slide, you'll see what I mean by that, and build out that capability on top of it. It encourages experimentation and innovation with minimal upfront investment. So again, we're seeing that cost efficiency coming out. We're seeing that in order to not have to break the budget, so to speak, and to do a lot of the paying your school fees, which is a term that basically means learning while you're building out a new product or application, you don't have to pay up as much because you can align your costs to your consumption from a cloud perspective. Security and compliance, it delivers robust security measures, including encryption and threat detection. I would put a caveat to that to say that that does not mean that you can fully outsource your security requirement. There is a requirement that you work with your service provider and have some degree of understanding of the security components that make up your environment or your network, so you can ensure that you've selected the right checkboxes, you've done the right configuration, and you've ensured that from your particular environment or your particular requirement is met. So there is a level of understanding that's required from you as the consumer. It also helps organizations meet regulatory requirements with built-in compliance tools. That talks to the GRC component. And essentially what that means is that because a lot of these providers have the ISO certification and the like, that gives you the ability to leverage their investment, and in turn means that from an auditing perspective, provided you've selected the right boxes, you've done the right configuration, you can pass those audits quite successfully. Okay, from a trends perspective, we spoke around digital transformation. I see there was a comment around hybrid and multi-cloud solutions, which essentially means you can have a private cloud and a public cloud. Private cloud just basically meaning that it's got an individual or specific use case for that particular users or individual user. It's not available to the public like your Microsoft or Oracle and the like. It essentially is a closed off investment that's made by your service provider to provide you the same level of functionality that's specific to you. Sector-specific growths, we've seen financial services, telecoms, oil and gas, they're leading the charge in cloud adoption. And I think a lot of it's driven by the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Remote work, the shift from remote work has accelerated. So we spoke around this around the COVID time. I think that trend has sort of reversed itself in the sense that a lot of people are starting to come back to the office, but that does not negate the need for us still to have that level of security or leverage a cloud platform, because oftentimes you may want to work from home in the morning, work from a coffee shop and the like, and you need to have that available as and when. Some of the challenges, infrastructure limitations, limited access to reliable internet and electricity in some regions. I spoke around that. Regulatory constraints, legal and compliance issues pose challenges. If you think about from a data perspective, different governments have different laws around where their data can reside. So if you're leveraging a cloud platform, let's say, for example, in another country that doesn't have the same regulatory framework that you have in your country of origin, it may create some complexity. And even some governments have said that in some instances, the data that's hosted in this cloud platform needs to be hosted in that country of origin and cannot leave the borders of that country. So we talk about data at rest, data in transit, which essentially means if I'm moving the data to another cloud platform, in some instances, that may not be allowed from a government or legislative perspective. Skills gap, as we know, within the IT space, more so in cybersecurity, there is a massive skills gap. So leveraging cloud environments gives you the fixed ability to implement and manage cloud solutions. So that's always going to be a constant challenge. And I guess that's why we're having this conversation with yourselves to bridge the gap between that and ensure that we don't have this massive gap of technology and not the skills to support it, right? From an opportunity perspective, you're going to get the cost savings, as I mentioned earlier. You're going to get the innovation, and to some extent, you're going to get the resilience. entrench this visual in your minds. So if you look at the visual on the left, that's the enterprise IT, that's the legacy IT. So I spoke around the CapEx investment. Traditionally, organizations would have to now go and invest in all of that capability, the servers, the storage, the networking, the switching, and everything designed to get that application to market. That's from a legacy perspective. If we look at infrastructure, we're now seeing that from a customer perspective, all those blue blocks, the applications, the security, the database, the OS is now the customer's responsibility. From a platform as a service perspective, those are largely dev environments in order to build out applications. I mentioned some of the retailers and the success they've had, and that's largely due to platform as a service because they, in some instances, there are predefined dev platforms which allowed you then to enhance, or I mean, if you think about open source, involve the code in order to build out an application that you need for your specific needs. From a software as a service, that essentially is think your cloud-based platforms, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your et cetera. That now becomes the onus resides with the service provider. But I challenge that because at the end of the day, if you don't keep your username and password secure, essentially, you cannot blame the software provider because the onus is on you to ensure that you manage that. Okay, so that's a recap. I thought it was important again just to touch on what we spoke of last time. What I want to play for you now, and I hope the sound is audible. I'm just going to stop sharing for 2 seconds. I just want to see if I'm sharing my sound. Okay. Okay, sound. Yeah, just sharing sound. Okay, is my screen back?
Is.
Yep. So essentially, this is what prompted my theme or topic for today. As I mentioned, I was in Valencia, Spain, and I came across these Ray-Ban Meta glasses. And I'd met a friend in South Africa. You can't get them in SA given our privacy laws. But essentially, so I was fortunate enough to travel abroad, and I bought a pair. And this prompted a lot of my thinking and inspired this topic. So if I start with the first video.
This sign into English.
The sign reads Mercado de Flores, which translates to flower market in English.
Hey Meta, translate this sign.
So essentially what's happening there, right, is through that Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, they come with a camera. And that camera is constantly, initially, what it was designed to do was take pictures and record video, but it's becoming more and more intelligent as the updates start to get more and more sophisticated. So in certain parts of the world, they don't work the same everywhere. For example, I have a pair. I cannot do the same level of AI intelligence or reading signs or interact with my live environment because of South African privacy laws. I've tried using a VPN to mask where I'm using the glasses from, but they've also picked up on that. And within a few minutes, they're able to put you back into your country of origin. But as I travel abroad and I move to different countries, I then get more intelligence through these glasses. But then it prompted me to think about a lot of things. And I'll play the next 2 videos for you.
No, I think I'll take your 3 recommendations. Your first ones, please.
Chorizo, parrillera, y spicy or mild?
Spicy, please.
Okay. And 1 beer?
Please.
Me vas a dar un agua mineral.
Dale, ¿las pone todo junto?
No, yo vengo sola.
Ah, perdón, que
So essentially what's happening in that video, that's me in Valencia city center. I went to grab some lunch and a cold beer, as you can hear. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm recording that interaction, but I did not get permission. And that's the one thing that said to me, I'm walking around, I'm recording people, I'm interacting with people, but I don't have their permission. The glasses have a light on the right-hand side to basically indicate to people that you are being recorded, and you get a stern warning when you buy them that you need to act responsibly and you need to use them within certain reason and agree to a certain EULA, which is an end user license agreement. But essentially, some people are none the wiser to what's happening. So here I am recording people, without their consent. I'm capturing information, and that also can be used for nefarious activities. And I'll play you the last video.
So if you take a look at this, see what this guy's about. Oh, wonderful. It's like a mini empanada, but it's Colombian-inspired one. Smells amazing. Tastes pretty good, eh? I love spicy food. Wow. It's really good. Really, really good.
You see, you have the ability now to capture moments in real time and record. You can even stream from the glasses in real time. And again, for me, that created a lot of questions around, data governance, data security, and some other use cases. And I'll talk a bit about it as we move on. But essentially, I found myself, during the day wearing my glasses, logging onto internet banking, and I quickly have to remove the glasses quickly because essentially, if anyone's able to get information from my glasses, they can essentially, or hack my glasses, they can essentially get that information and be able to see my password, my username. So you really have to be aware of your environment when you're wearing these glasses because nothing is bulletproof. And I'll talk around it as we move forward. But essentially, what I'm saying is that even if you think about it, these videos that I've recorded, my own personal ones, they live on the actual glasses. I then move them through an application onto my smartphone, but that requires a Wi-Fi connection. So really, you can see there's an opportunity through wireless hacking, etc., for them maybe to hijack that session or essentially get access to my glasses. And we won't talk too much around the intricacies. That's not for today's session. But essentially, I want you to start thinking around, as we start to advance and as technology becomes more and more formalized, we need to start having these conversations. And equally, there's a responsibility on all of us to use the technology responsibly.
So if you take a look at this, see what this guy's
Go to the
about.
next slide.
Take this sign into English.
No, I think I'll take your
It's going a bit wonky now. Let me just, here's the next slide. Okay, let me just exit for 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds so I can get on this.
Unathi is still there.
I believe maybe his camera froze. Do you
Okay.
also
Yeah,
you
let's give him a sec.
anything-
I'll WhatsApp him.
All right, we can now see you.
Unathi is still there.
You're muted. No, oh, no, sorry. You're speaking on the phone.
Okay, Unachi's laptop is frozen, so everyone just sit tight. Anonymous, you posed a question in the chat and I answered it. Please look at the answer in the Q&A. The email apparently has now gone out for the challenges by Eventbrite. So please, everybody be on the lookout for an email regarding the challenges, and also check in your junk folder or your spam folder to make sure that you don't miss the mail. It's really important, please. In regards to the cutoff time tomorrow for the challenges, so that's important. If you want to enter the Cyber Talent Accelerator, please make sure you enter a challenge before 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe we can take this moment since while Unathi gets his computer back and running, the link for the survey is actually in the chat as well right now. So if you want to take advantage of this moment, it would be good just to get it out of the way. I'll be posting it also in the, oh, here we go. All right, perfect. Never mind then, back to the lecture.
It's your PowerPoint, Unathi.
Can you hear me?
I can, and I can see your PowerPoint.
My apologies. It's this Teams is just, I don't know if they pushed an update, but it's just not doing what I wanted to. My apologies.
That's Microsoft for you.
Yeah, man.
Don't
Ah.
stress. We had some class announcements to make, so we just used the time.
Okay, perfect. Nice. Serious. Okay.
Thanks.
Just want to move this up here. Okay, cool.
Unathi, you've got about 20 minutes left, including
Okay.
question time.
So
Thanks.
10 minutes. Okay, I'll wrap up in 10, not a problem.
20 minutes,
20
including
minutes.
questions.
Okay, cool. So as I was saying, and apologies for that, for technology. The one thing about technology, like I said, nothing's bulletproof. It will fail you at some point. So as you progress in your careers and understanding, you just got to get used to it. You know, like they say, the show must go on. So anyway, so as we're talking about smart devices and cybersecurity, and I think it's very important. And I think as we start evolving as a country, and more so, the more technology advances and changes, we need to start having these conversations, right? So what are some of the things that we need to look at? The data collection and privacy, right? So some of these end-user license agreements grant software providers the right to collect data, sensitive information, browsing habits, locations, and personal details. And for me personally, I think that's a huge amount of risk. You know, the fact that I'm walking around with a smart pair of glasses, they can track my movements, they can record some of my interactions, and who really owns the data? And the one thing I've also noticed is that they keep changing the end user license agreement. So with every update, it's accept our terms, accept our terms, accept our terms. So essentially, because Meta is a data-driven company, they did a collaboration with Ray-Ban, being a sunglass company. They've managed to bridge that divide to say, how do we get more data around users' behavior? And equally, how can we monetize this data? Because now if we're able to see what users are doing in the real world, as opposed to the virtual world, how can we use that to our benefit, right? And that talks to the next point around the data being able to be shared with third parties, obviously increasing the risk of misuse or exposure, right? Third-party access, as I mentioned, you've got a tech company that is Meta, you've got a sunglass company that is Ray-Ban, who is bridging the gap, who's also has access to that data. So there may be a situation where in those user license agreements, third-party vendors have access to your system and data. You know, that creates another risk and additional vulnerabilities because we don't know the security fabric or the security measures that are taken by these third parties and how they process and measure and capture, and equally on what server environment within the world that is stored, right? Cascading EULAs can lead to multiple unknown parties gaining access to information. As I mentioned, they keep changing their terms all the time. And essentially what they're doing is that, and I'm guilty of it as well, in some instances, because you want to update the glasses, using this as an example, to get the latest functionality, you often just agree to the terms without even reading them, right? And some of these terms are unclear, they're vague, they use different type of languages that can open you up to just, agreeing to things that don't make sense. Like, for example, monitoring, data sharing, and all of those terms may mean something within our world, being IT professionals, but to the layman who's not very well versed or IT savvy, if you will, that may open them up for additional risk, right? Automatic updates, we're always encouraged to put automatic updates within our environments. We touched on the Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft ecosystem, and more often than not, that is a good cybersecurity practice. But I think with these smart devices, that we need to be very specific about the updates that we allow, because then it's going to have access to certain things, and it may also introduce vulnerabilities if these updates aren't tested or there is some sort of use case that's put forward, right? From a software behavior perspective, these end user license agreements may include clauses that allow them to modify system settings, install additional components, or run background processes, potentially leading to security risks. I gave the example of my smart glasses interacting with my phone through an app. So what ends up happening is that often when I look at my phone, it will give me all the applications that are running in the background. So I'm always running an antivirus. So I know there's always going to be one application that runs incessantly, right, to ensure that I'm covered from a security perspective. But I often note that when I'm wearing the glasses, the application, Ray-Ban Meta application, is running in the background. And I often find myself having to turn it off or remove it, because when I'm accessing banking apps or other information or other sensitive information, I don't know what app permissions it has. I don't know what it's looking at, and it's prompted me to interrogate it a bit more. And that's what I've spent a lot of my time now doing, to understand what am I getting myself into in using this technology. Legally binding, some of these EULA may waive certain rights, such as the ability to hold the provider accountable for security breaches. That is massive risk, in my opinion, because essentially what that means is that you consume a smart device or a smart technology. I mean, think about an Amazon Echo, think about a Fitbit, think about a smartwatch. And if anyone is able to get onto your phone through that smart device, they absolve themselves in some instances. And that means you're on your own. So, I'd like to believe it's not often the case, but there are instances where in these user agreements, your security is not of importance to them. They ultimately want the data because they're in the business of harnessing the data. So often security may be negated or neglected. And that means in turn, that risk passes to you. Not often all the case, but I think when you look at these EULAs, start looking at the security terms and how that risk is passed, absorbed, or transferred, right? What are some of the best practices for securing smart devices, right? Always change default credentials. I mean, even on your wireless router at home, I think it's very important that you change all of those username and passwords and make it strong and unique, right? I know I'm going to say something a bit contradictory in the sense that regular updates keep device firmware and software up to date to patch vulnerabilities again, but interrogate when that update comes. Read what the purpose of that update is. Understand the security risk that comes with it. Interpret where the risk would reside should you find yourself in a security breach. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to enter into a blame game. And you want to be in a situation where you fully understand and you accept and you quantify the risk that you potentially exposed through using these devices. Secure network, again, strong Wi-Fi passwords. Consider setting up a separate network for smart devices. I mean, something simple like in my home wireless network, I don't allow anyone to connect just to my network. I create a guest network. And similarly, with all these smart devices coming on, I need to segregate it further to connect IoT or smart appliance device in order to ensure that all the interactions and all the sessions are not into one. And I'm able to segregate and not so that all these my guests don't have access to what I'm doing within my internal network. And equally, these devices don't have access to what I'm doing within my main network, if you will, right? And when I say network, I refer to the Wi-Fi. Two-factor authentication, that's a must now. I don't even think it's a negotiable. We have to have two-factor authentication. I would even go as far as to say that, you should install an antivirus or an endpoint protection on your device. I know a lot of these devices come with it built in, but just to have that extra level, even when it comes to my banking apps, You know, a lot of them are hidden. So even if my phone was lost or stolen, you wouldn't be able to access the banking apps. You'd have to find them, and they're hidden behind another factor authentication with the endpoint protection. So it becomes very difficult. Disable unused features, microphones, cameras when not in use. One of the things that keeps me up at night, or rather keeps my mind ticking during the day, is when I'm wearing the glasses. How do I know that it's off? How do I know that I'm having a very sensitive conversation, that it's not recording it, given the permissions that I've given it, right? Monitor device user activity, check for unusual behavior or unauthorized access. How you do that, just go into your settings, look through your phone, run a Google search or a search in your phone to see what applications are running at what time and what is actually active and moving or leveraging some of your resources on your particular device. Again, read carefully, read. I know it's onerous. I know they make them so long sometimes, but I think it's important to understand what level of risk you're exposing yourself to. Use trusted software. I think that speaks for itself. You can't be using, software that hasn't been vetted or carries a certain level of security fabric. Seek clarification. Consult, chat to some guys that are within the field, be it from a legal or cybersecurity perspective, but get that insight. I think it's of utmost important. And I think if you take anything from today's session, limit permissions, right? Restrict the software permissions to only allow what is necessary for functionality. As you'll see on your smartphone, for example, it would say to you, what would you want to allow this device to do? What level of functionality or permission would you like to grant it? Be very careful in just saying allow all, because that could also come back to bite you. So I think I'm staying on time. So in summary, what do we touch on? We spoke about product management, right? Which being the strategic process of guiding a product's development, launch, ongoing improvement by balancing customer needs, business objectives, and technological capabilities. We spoke around cloud adoption, right? Which I think drives a lot of what we're seeing within the smart devices, the smart appliances, the smart TVs, whatever it may be, the Fitbits. A lot of these live on cloud-based platforms. So I think it was important for me to give you the context as to why we're seeing this explosion of smart technology, because they use the scalability, they use the cost efficiency, they use the innovation and the opportunities to enhance security and global accessibility. On that, it was quite funny, the Ray-Ban Meta collaboration, they never thought it would be as big as it was. I mean, I think Mark Zuckerberg's quoted as saying in some instances, it's unbelievable the amount of people that have gravitated towards the technology, so much so that they're going to continuously invest and build out, the functionality, and it's been a huge success. So, and I think a lot of this was built on cloud technologies and leveraging the scalability and the minimum investment. The cloud responsibility matrix, understand when consuming a cloud-based platform where your responsibility stops and starts, even from a user, from a SaaS perspective, using software as a service applications. Smart devices and cybersecurity, I think I touched on that and I was quite clear in that. And then some aspects related to securing smart devices. And then I'd like to close with a quote, which I think has really been the basis of my career. When I started my job in IT many years ago, well, not that long ago, I was confronted with this quote in one of our learning sessions. And it goes, in learning you will teach, and in teaching you will learn. And I think that is the fundamental premise of how you will be successful in the IT industry. Understand that as much as you learn, your obligation, in my opinion, is to impart that knowledge. And in imparting that knowledge, you test your own knowledge. So I thank you for your time today. Any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you for a wonderful lecture. I really enjoyed that it was different. I love the fact that you looked at smart devices specifically and how these obviously increasingly connect sort of to the cloud, the whole fog kind of precepts and the difficulties there in terms of data integrity and protection. And your parting comment about imparting knowledge and testing yourself through teaching, I think is very, very true. But the students don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from you. So I'm going to take questions. And my first question for you is from Chanda. Chanda, you can unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Thank you very much, My question is, what steps should organization take today to future-proof cloud smart device communications against quantum computing threats to current corruption standards?
Okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying what steps should an organization take to ensure cloud platforms and devices?
Specifically,
what
spoke
steps
about quantum.
what steps should organization take today to future-proof cloud smart device communication against quantum computing threats to current corruption standards?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I wasn't expecting that, but I think if I'm understanding you correctly, right, we always say that the first step is understanding your environment and the complexities and the components thereof, right? So we always start with an assessment, and that assessment will give us the ability to understand the intricacies of your particular environment from a network perspective. We talk around BYOD, which essentially means bring your own device. So we have a lot of people bringing on different devices onto the network, and understanding your risk that's specific to your organization is the first starting point. I know you mentioned you touched on quantum computing, but when it comes to a cloud-based platform, the best approach I would say would be a zero trust network access, which essentially means always assume breach. So if you think about it, in order to safeguard against different systems, different platforms, or people having access to information they should have, or platforms, or different environments or servers or infrastructure, you must always, the zero trust network architecture always assumes breach, right? So essentially it means that give access as and when required to fulfill a certain function, and when that function is done, remove that access, right? So essentially it's also referred to as just in time. So it gives you the ability to control and gives you visibility into who has access to what. If we look at PIM and PAM, which is privileged access management, which essentially means that from an Active Directory perspective and a user perspective or a device perspective, you need to understand what needs to access what during what period and why. And if there are any instances where that particular platform or that user is not within a particular time frame, or is not from a particular location, because you can also geolocate it, then you would not allow that access. So that's just the ways in which you can limit and protect, as you start moving towards cloud environments. But I think the short answer to your question is that the best approach is always to understand what your real estate looks like by conducting an assessment and building a roadmap. If you want to move towards a more sophisticated or innovative or quantum computing, AI, robotics, whatever it may be, machine learning, you equally need to understand what are the complexities of your environment today. What do I need to put in place if I want to start consuming those platforms or being able to offer those services? How it would look like in accordance with the roadmap. I know I answered your question a bit long there, but I mean, you can happily shoot me a mail if you want to go a bit deeper, but I just thought that I'd give you a bit of a high level view on that.
Thank you, Unathi. Thuso Mokhatle, you can ask your question. I'd like to get through at least 2 more questions. So Thuso and then Zanani will go after you. Shoot. Please unmute your mic.
Good day, everyone. Thank the wonderful lecture today. My question is straightforward. I'd like to know how does PaaS, like platform as a service, safeguard users from cyber attacks?
That's a good question. So if you look at the platform as a service, right, if you look at the shared responsibility matrix that I put forward, that means that everything outside of the application is the cloud provider's responsibility, right? So let's say, for example, I want to develop an application and I'm going to go into, we'll use Microsoft, for example. I'm going to go into an Azure environment, and in that environment, if there is predefined code or predefined application code that's built, I then get to leverage open source software, for example. Open source software gives the ability to code and define and build applications in a cloud-based platform. How does that safeguard you from a security perspective? The only thing you need to be concerned about is the code within that application and ultimately the security components of that application. When it comes to all the other considerations, the firewalling, the switching, the routing, the network, et cetera, that becomes the responsibility of the platform as a service provider. So essentially, they will give you predefined dev environments upon which for you can either bring your own code, you can leverage some of the open source that's already there, but they've already considered a lot of the security components. That does not negate the fact that you still need to do what we call as DevSecOps, which essentially means that in your development cycle, you still need to take some security considerations as it pertains to your code and the security components thereof. But essentially, it just gives you the ability to focus on what you intend to deliver or what you intend to design in the application, and the cloud provider assumes responsibility for the rest.
Thank you, Unathi. Our next question is coming from Zanani. Can I unmute your mic? Let me just make sure I have allowed your mic is enabled. Zanani, please unmute your microphone. Ask your question. Okay, Tyron Habnar, you can go.
Hi. Sorry, I was
Hi,
having trouble
Sonali.
unmuting there. I just wanted
That's
to
okay.
thank Unathi for the really clear, concise, and easy to understand lecture today. But my question is, where would we be able to access South Africa's privacy laws, and are they specific to every kind of device, or is it kind of just a general thing, and then like as and when it affects the specific device, does it then prohibit the use of that device? Thanks.
That is a fantastic question. There are things that are currently being put in place, like POPIA, which essentially governs how data is transmitted, how data is stored, and basically how to manage personal data. To give you an example, if you think about what was recently passed within the city of Johannesburg, they passed a bit of legislation stating that, those boomer cams that record suburbs and people's movements, etc., they often use those cams as crime-fighting mechanisms, or those cameras, sorry, as crime-fighting mechanisms. And essentially what ended up happening was that people started to post on different social media platforms, a robbery, a breakery, a break-in, or whatever it may be. And now with the new legislature that's been passed, you cannot post anything from a CCTV camera that captures a public space, right? You have to get a case number from SAPS. And once you have the case number from SAPS, you then can have access to that particular information. And from then you can institute action, but you can't put it on a social media platform, right? So it's very dynamic in the sense that it's not device specific per se as yet, and I think it will eventually get there. But essentially what we're starting to see from a South African perspective, as I mentioned, POPIA, the Cyber Crimes Act, it's starting to become more and more formalized. So governments understanding that we need to regulate and we need to make this information publicly available on different platforms. So through some of the Google searches, you can find what are some of the privacy laws as it pertains to South Africa, and equally from a global perspective, like GDPR. But actually, to answer your question another way, hence my earlier comment around the Ray-Ban glasses, because of our privacy laws, I cannot use the same functionality as I do when I'm in, for example, Spain. And equally, I cannot use the same functionality when I'm in Amsterdam. So it is publicly available, but what will end up happening with these smart devices is that some of the functionality will be limited. But if you look at a good place to start, Cyber Crimes Act, POPIA, and then from there it will lead you on to a lot of the others.
Thank you, Unathi. I think the time has come for us to let you go. I really want to thank you on behalf of myself and all the students in the class today, and there were many students, well over 400. We know you're a really busy guy, and I loved your lecture. and it's so good to always hear from you. You're such a great speaker. So thank you for taking this time to support Thanks, Unathi.
Anytime. And thank you so much for including me. I'm always available, willing, and happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To the students in the class, you can skedaddle onto your next lecture.
Cheers. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.